Most Americans are aware that we have a government, President Obama, Congress and all, but don't know a whole lot about what exactly government does and how government works. It turns out that American government is like a machine, a complicated, immense, expensive, powerful, and really quite amazing machine, filled with gears, levers, belts, and all sorts of whirling and buzzing things. And, whether you know it or not, the machinery of government affects virtually every aspect of your lives, every moment of every day. The purpose of the Advanced Placement Government and Politics course is to carefully observe this machine so that we can describe all of its moving parts and understand how it works, or doesn't work, what it's supposed to do, and what we can do to make it work better. Government is a machine. The purpose of this course is to turn you into a mechanic. Let's start by defining what are probably the three most important terms in this course. Two of the terms are in the course title, government and politics. The third term, public policy, really should be in the course title, but was left out because AP GoPop was too difficult to say. If I wanted to define these three terms as simply as possible, I'd say that government is a thing that makes public policy through a process known as politics. I think it makes sense to look first at the thing itself, government, and then look at what government makes, public policy, and finally consider politics, or how government makes what it makes. Okay, so first of all, what is government? Well, let's start with what you already know. Unless you've been living under a rock, you probably recognize this guy, President Barack Obama. He's our 44th president, first black president. He's probably the most recognizable part of the American government, and he lives in America's most recognizable government building, the White House in Washington, D.C. You probably also know that government creates laws, and that in America, our lawmaking is done in this rather impressive-looking building, the United States Capitol, which is just down the road from the White House in Washington, D.C. Government also employs police officers and other law enforcement agents to enforce laws. It has a judicial system, a system of courts, where judges interpret laws and help figure out whether laws have been broken or not. Our government also maintains a military force to protect our nation against foreign threats. All of these things and more are part of government. The purpose of government, from Obama to the policeman on the street corner, is to make decisions and rules for our society to make us safer and happier. Kind of like parents, I suppose. And so a formal definition of government is an institution, or organization, in society that has the power to make decisions and enforce rules for that society. The purpose of government in general is to make decisions and enforce rules for our society, but we should say a bit more now about the American system of government in particular. One of the first things we've got to realize about government in America, and something that unfortunately makes our system of government quite difficult at times to figure out, is that the American government is actually divided into two main levels, and these two levels share power and responsibilities. This system of shared power is known as federalism. One level of government is the central government, also called the federal or national government. It's the one Obama works for. Its headquarters are in Washington, D.C., which is our federal or national capital. The federal government makes decisions and enforces rules for the entire United States. The second level of government in America are the 50 states. Each state has its own government that makes decisions and enforces rules within the borders of its state. So right away we can see that everyone in America will feel the impact of not one but two levels of government. This makes you doubly protected or doubly miserable depending on your personal feelings about government. Speeding drivers will be pulled over and ticketed by state police working for the state government, enforcing state law. Internet pirates will be arrested by the federal police, known as the Federal Bureau of Investigation, or FBI, working for the federal government and enforcing federal law. This course looks mostly at how the federal government is set up and works. The federal government is divided into three main branches, or parts. The first branch of the federal government is the legislative branch. The verb to legislate means to make laws, so the purpose of the legislative branch is to make laws. Our federal legislature is known as the United States Congress. The second branch of the federal government is the executive branch. The verb to execute means to carry out, so the purpose of the executive branch is to carry out laws passed by the U.S. Congress. The head of the executive branch, or chief executive, is the president. Since we have a large country and a lot of laws, the president has a bunch of people that help him carry out the laws. We call these helpers the federal bureaucracy. The third branch of the federal government is the judicial branch. The judicial branch consists of the federal judiciary or court system. The purpose of courts is to interpret laws and resolve disputes. The federal judiciary is headed by the Supreme Court. This central government, divided into three branches, has certain powers and responsibilities in our federal system of government, but as we've seen, it has to share power with 50 state governments. Although this course is primarily about the federal government and what it does, we will also look at what the state governments do, and especially how they interact with the federal government in this system. Okay, so that's our brief overview of what government is and how the American government is set up. Now let's look at what it makes: public policy. Public policies are the choices or decisions government makes to respond to various issues in our society. So what does this mean? Well, for example, government can develop and implement public policies in areas such as education, immigration, energy development and consumption, environmental protection, and national security. Every one of these public policy issues involves controversial and complex questions that government must confront to hopefully make America a better and happier place. Important policy questions that are being addressed by our government today include whether to allow gay people to get married, whether to legalize marijuana, and how to defend America against the threat of terrorism. Government is an institution that makes public policies for our society. Politics, the third term we need to define, is simply the process by which government makes these public policy decisions. It is how laws and other public policy decisions get made. Politics is simple to define, but it's an amazingly complex process to understand. The political process is kind of like a Rube Goldberg contraption. Hundreds of different moving parts are involved, and everything must align perfectly to produce the end product: laws and other government actions. Another problem in studying and understanding the political process is that much of it occurs behind closed doors. Some people even think that the game of politics is rigged so that our government only responds to the wishes of the rich and powerful. So now we've introduced our government and seen that it makes public policy through a process known as politics. But what's missing from this picture? Well, how about you and I, the people that must live with the decision our government makes? We need to know how ordinary people fit into our system of government. For much of history, ordinary people really didn't have much of a say about government. They were expected to be obedient servants to their masters, whether they be kings or warlords. The American government was one of the first in the world to be founded very firmly on the belief that ordinary people, and not rulers, are the ultimate source of power in the political system. This revolutionary idea is known as popular sovereignty. Popular sovereignty is the belief that the people are the ultimate source of power in a society. A government built on the principle of popular sovereignty means that it was created by the people to work for the people. We give our government significant powers, but at the end of the day, President Obama, the Congress, the Supreme Court, and all federal officers and employees are our servants, and their job is to make our lives happier and safer. Now, if you were going to create a government and give it great powers over you, and you wanted to make sure it never abused those powers, you might want to write down a few instructions about how the government is to be set up, how it's supposed to work, and what exactly it can and cannot do. Something that will act as an instruction manual for government. And this is exactly what our founding fathers did back in 1787 when this country and its government was being born. The instruction manual is called the United States Constitution. You can see by the oversized first three words that popular sovereignty was an incredibly important concept for the founding fathers. The Constitution itself is surprisingly short, with only 4,543 words. It is in fact the world's shortest constitution, but it is without a doubt the single most important document in our entire political system. So what is a constitution? The verb to constitute means to create or to establish. A constitution is a formal agreement by a society, usually in writing, that creates or establishes a system of government for that society. In order to set up a properly functioning government, the United States Constitution addresses three critical questions. 1. What will the structure of government look like? 2. What powers will the government have? And 3. How will the people prevent government from becoming a tyranny? The US Constitution was written in 1787, and the government it established got up and running in 1789 under the leadership of our first president, George Washington. This government has been around ever since, growing along with our nation and making all sorts of public policy choices for the American people along the way. The Constitution is the most important statement by we the people about what we want our government to be and to do. However, it's important to examine not only the values that are enshrined in the Constitution, but also what exactly the American people believe about government and public policy from day to day, and how they try to influence the political process. We'll look at the political beliefs and behaviors of ordinary people in a unit called Political Beliefs and Behaviors. In exploring political beliefs, we'll look at things like where our beliefs come from, and the labels people often use to describe themselves and others: liberal, conservative, libertarian, and more. With political behavior, we'll look at things like voting, protesting, volunteering for political campaigns, and, unfortunately, sitting on the couch doing nothing. We the people have all sorts of beliefs about government and public policies, and our government is supposed to respond to these beliefs to make us happier and safer. But this relationship is only possible if ordinary people and the government can communicate with each other on a regular basis. Fortunately, there are a number of ways to do this in our society. These avenues of communication are known as linkage institutions. A linkage institution is something that links or connects ordinary people like you and me to the government, and also links the government back to the people. In this course, we'll be looking at 4 important linkage institutions: elections, the mass media, interest groups, and political parties. You're probably already familiar with elections. Elections are held to choose representatives to serve in government for a limited time. At the federal level, elections are held every 2 years for members of Congress and every 4 years for the president. Elections are linkage institutions because ordinary people get the chance to choose the leaders that will be making public policy decisions in government and fire leaders who are not making the right choices. The mass media are means of communication that reach large audiences. Mass media techniques have developed with advancements in communication technology, beginning with pamphlets and newspapers, and then expanding in the 20th century to take advantage of the radio, the TV, and finally, the internet. The mass media acts as a linkage institution because it lets us know what our government is doing, or at least it tries to. Without a free and independent news media accurately reporting on our government's actions, American citizens would be unable to participate meaningfully in the development of public policy. Interest groups are another important linkage institution. Interest groups are groups of people who share the same interests, but more importantly, interest groups seek to persuade public policymakers, like Congress and the President, to support their views and protect their interests. Some interest groups have millions of members and raise millions of dollars to try and support their policy goals. The National Rifle Association, for example, works hard to protect the interests of gun enthusiasts. Greenpeace works in America and across the globe to protect the environment. The final linkage institution we'll consider in this class is political parties. Political parties are organized groups of people who seek to influence and control public policy directly by competing in and winning elective office. Political parties have been around since the time of George Washington. Today, of course, there are 2 major political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans. But there are also a number of third parties, such as the Libertarian Party and the Green Party. Okay, we're almost at the end of our course overview. We've seen that American government is built on the principle of popular sovereignty. Government is created by the people to work for the people. This relationship is spelled out in the Constitution, the fundamental law establishing our system of government. Our government's job is to create public policy for our society through the political process. These public policies govern our society and hopefully make the American people happier, safer, and stronger. The American people have a continually evolving set of beliefs and behaviors about politics, and this influences government and the political process through various linkage institutions such as elections, the mass media, interest groups, and political parties. There are only 2 other topics to consider in this introductory course: civil liberties and civil rights. Civil liberties refers to a set of fundamental rights and freedoms all people have that cannot be taken away or messed with in any way by the government. The Constitution contains many specific examples of civil liberties, especially in the Bill of Rights, the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. The First Amendment, for example, guarantees freedom of speech and religion. The Second Amendment guarantees the right to bear arms, and the Eighth Amendment guarantees the right not to be subjected to cruel and unusual punishment. Civil rights are the rights to participate fully in society and to not be discriminated against unfairly. Civil rights need to be guaranteed and enforced by the government. In America, civil rights are most frequently associated with the long struggle against racial discrimination led by Martin Luther King and others. But we will also look at the civil rights movements to end discrimination based on gender, sexual orientation, age, mental and physical disability, and more. So that concludes our quick introduction to AP Government and Politics. The United States Constitution establishes our government. The government makes public policy through the political process. Public policies impact ordinary people, who then communicate their beliefs and wishes to the government through linkage institutions. Throughout this ongoing political process, our civil liberties and civil rights must be protected and preserved.
Every fact, every department of your mind is to be programmed by you. And unless you assume your rightful responsibility and begin to program your own mind, the world will program it for you.